This is lesson 7.1, day 1. We're going to talk about midpoints. Midpoint is the point halfway between the endpoints on a segment. So the point halfway between the endpoints on a segment. So we have a formula that we can use to find this. If we were just looking at a number line, we would just add the two numbers and divide by 2. So when we have coordinates, we just do that twice. So we add the x's and divide by 2, and we add the y's and divide by 2, and we get the midpoint between those 2 points. So for this midpoint here, we have an x and a y, an x and a y, a first pair and a second pair. We're going to add our x's together, which would be 4 and -9, and divide by 2. And then we're going to add our y's together and divide by 2. So adding first and then dividing by 2. So we have a -5/2. And we have a -3/2. So you can leave it like that, or you can write it as -2.5 if you wanted to use your calculator, -1.5. So go ahead and try that next one on your own using our formula up above. Go ahead and find the midpoint. Do not leave it like 4/2 and 12/2 because we can go ahead and simplify. So you want to simplify as much as possible. And we're done. Now you can actually find midpoint in a coordinate plane. So instead of distant, we're not doing distance, we're just going to find where the middle is. So if we find kind of our slope, in a sense, how much we go up and over, we just go half that much. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. We would only want to go up 4, and then over 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, we would only want to go up 4 and over 3. And that would help us to find our midpoint, which would be -2, -1. So this next one, find B if we know the midpoint is 111, and we know one of the ends is 7, -14. So we know the middle, and we know T, we just don't know B. So I'm going to so just like we talked about over here, we're going to figure out, well, how much did we go over? And we're going to just repeat that same pattern. So from 7 to 1, that would be a subtracting 6. So we want to subtract 6 to get our x coordinate for B. So 1 minus 6 is -5. And now we're going to do that same thing for our y's. Here, -14 to 11, we would be adding 25 to get from -14 to 11. That would be an addition of 25. So we are going to add 25 to 11, and that will give me 36. Next one. So it's super important to make sure we're paying attention to, if they already give us the midpoint, we're not going to use the midpoint formula to find the midpoint. We already have it. So on this next one, M is the midpoint, and it says that M, so we already have the midpoint. We're not using our formula. We're kind of using this problem solving to figure out what the other end is. So I'm going to go ahead and put this in the middle. And then I have X, Y. So M, and then I have an X and a Y, kind of sketching it out. And I know X over here is a 2, 7. I don't know Y though. That's what I'm trying to figure out. Put my coordinates up above. There we go. So I'm going to go from 2 to 6, and that's a addition of 4. So I'm going to add 4 again. So go ahead and figure out what that would be. Then go ahead and figure out from 7 to 1 what happened, and repeat that same step to find your y. So we should have coordinates of 10, negative 5. So adding 4 for my x would give me the 10 when I add it to the 6. And then when I go from 7 to 1, I'm subtracting 6. So I need to subtract 6 again to get to my final endpoint. So what would be the endpoints here if my midpoint was 5? If you tried to use negative 9 or through positive 9, what were some numbers that you could put in here that would get you a midpoint there of 5? And then what if you had an endpoint of 3? Pick another endpoint and then find its midpoint. Here's a sample example. There are lots of options because basically we're just adding up our endpoints, and then if we divide by 2, it should give us our middle number, right? So if I were to take 9 plus 3, that's 12. 12 divided by 2 is going to give me the 6. So we add our endpoints, divide by 2. So lots of different options for that one. How do you know that 0, 5 is point B, the other endpoint? So this is kind of goes back to this example right here where we're given the midpoint. We want to figure out our pattern. Up 3, so kind of like adding 3, and then right 2, so a plus 2. So we're going to go up 3 and right 2. And kind of repeating that same pattern. You could also show then this point and this point in the formula if you were trying to explain, but it's basically what we did up here, kind of repeating that pattern to make that the midpoint.